I'm back again and just in time to go over the next OCG release, Power of the Elements. If all goes to plan, I'll be releasing other videos leading up to this set's release about the new cards. So let's dive into this aquatic fusion-based deck with Reno Heart, which can send any Tearalament monster from deck to grave on summon. This will set off most of the Tearalament secondary effects off, which I'll go over in just a moment. Reno bringing herself back if sent to grave by a card effect can come up at times, such as using her for the classic polymerization spell card, her as cost for the trap cards Tearalament have at their disposal. Overall, a solid starter card for the deck and a staple 3 of. Siren is up next, a combo extender that can summon from hand by discarding one monster, then sends the top 3 cards of deck to your grave, and starts off the theme of its secondary effects, which is seen on most of their monsters, except Reno Heart. That when sent to grave lets you fusion summon by placing the materials to the bottom of the deck in any order you decide. So recycling cards and a free summon on every main deck monster and archetype. Count me in, who doesn't want a pot of avarice built into every monster? Well, with a summon rather than draw the cards. She gives the deck additional plays if your first summon has its effects negated or hit with Ash Blossom, so the deck can still function and attempt to perform its combos as planned. Now let's move to Hoffman, which lets us summon her and mill 3 cards from the top of our deck in response to a monster effect activating. You thought you were safe on your turn? Well, tough luck. You're never safe from hand traps these days, even if they don't negate that card effect. But potentially getting to fusion summon or trigger card effects in grave on your opponent's turn is too good of an effect to pass up on. Plus, getting additional bodies on board is never a bad thing. We'll get to the traps eventually, but we've got a few other pieces to go over, like Miro here. That unsummon mills 3 cards from the top of the deck. So if you don't draw Reno, you can use her. It's a nice plan B, but with her weak stats, she's not exactly stealing the show or attacking over many monsters. But it's necessary to have as many Tearalaments as we can get for the deck. Next up is the field spell, Reno the Primal Parallel Ruin Realm. Well, that's one hell of a mouthful to say, but it adds any Tearalament monster of Visa's Star Frost from deck to hand. Because every archetype needs one field spell that boosts them, but I'm surprised it doesn't count as a Tearalament card itself. Would have been a nice little addition to have. But the effect to destroy a card when a Tearalament is placed at bottom of deck or extra deck works perfectly with Hoffman, and another card that's released outside of Power of the Elements. But I'll cover the OCG reveals after what we're getting first. To our fusion, starting with Kikolos, which only needs a Tearalament and 1 aqua monster as material, so it's simple enough to use. Which also is a valid instant fusion target, since the effect to add to hand or send to grave any Tearalament card is on summon, and not specifically fusion summon. And since instant fusion destroys the card summoned in the end phase of that turn or last effect when sent to grave by a card effect activates milling 5 cards. Meaning we can potentially fusion summon again or gain some benefit from milling cards again, because you can never mill too much in this deck most of the time from my experience so far. But Gohard is the main big boss we have so far, requiring Reno Heart as material into Aquas makes her a bit pricier to summon, but with King of the Swamp being in the deck helps pay for it, since he replaces any specific named cards as material for a fusion summon if the rest are correct, and her effects are worth the extra loops to jump through to summon her, trust me. Which on summon, or when an Aqua is sent to the grave because of a card effect, target 1 card on the field and shuffle into the deck. This helps in the mirror match. And if you fusion summon her with a Tearalament effect with a field spell up, you can clear the cards off the field in one go. A nice little combo that can help a lot. On top of that, if she's sent to the grave because of any card effect, she comes back, which if you haven't shuffled a card with her first effect already triggers that one to go off. Which you'll want to keep in mind when covering the fusion monster in the OCG reveal section of this video. But for now, she'll be your main ace fusion monster to go into. Now finally, we get to the traps after all of that. The Meta Noise, which is rather fitting considering its status as a top-tier contender deck as of now. Flips 1 monster face down if you control a Tearalament, then sends 1 Tearalament from deck to grave. A Book of Moon and a way to trigger Tearalament's fusion summoning method. Looks good to me. It can be a target for Trap Trick to set it faster, but with Kikolos potentially adding it, Trap Trick isn't fully needed. Also when sent to grave because of an effect, add any Tearalament monster to your hand, which the other trap I'll be covering has the same last effect. So milling them on your turn still benefits you. This also means back row removal will trigger the search effect. Well, most besides Cosmic Cyclone, of course, which might be used in the side deck to counter this deck, so be aware of that. Next is Salic, which if you control a Tearalament monster targets 1 monster and negates its effect, and sends 1 effect monster you control to the grave. Yet again another way to trigger a fusion summon on your opponent's turn. Again, it's never your turn. It's ours. Last but not least is Crime, that old Crime, which can negate an effect activation and shuffles that card into the deck. Of course you need a Tearalament monster on field for this to be usable. But as part of the effect, you have to send a monster from field or hand to the grave. Say it with me, it's another way to fusion summon on your opponent's turn with Tearalament's last effect. Wow, it's almost like it's a running theme here, shocking. But this first wave of Tearalaments are pretty good as a starting point, and can stand up against the current meta decks. I would advise picking up Instant Fusion and King of the Swamp if you wish to build this deck, as they will be key to helping boost the deck's consistency since King is Aqua and fetches Polymerization. An Instant Fusion summons Kikolos for her search effect to go off. Overall, this first wave I'd rank it at 8 out of 10, but now it's onto the OCG cards we'll get later on in coming releases. Tearalament Grief can summon any Tearalament from deck or grave, but at the cost of having to send one card you control of the same type or attribute to the grave as the card you just summoned. I'm sorry, what? What the hell is this? A life point free version of a hero lives, and only for the cost of having to send another card from field to grave. That's just a whole new level of good. Even then, drawing this in mid to late game as a comeback card, you can summon any Tearalament, send that same card to the grave, and use its grave effect to fusion summon. The last effect when grief is sent to the grave is nice if your back row has been cosmic silkened off the field, but I guess it's decent enough to note. Overall, run it to 3 copies at your choice. Next up is Heartbeats, which lets you shuffle any spell or trap into the deck, but at a cost of sending one monster from field or hand to grave. Cost is in very big quotation marks there to be clear, because oh no, I have to send a Tearalament to grave, whatever will I do? Oh yeah, fusion summon for the 15th time this turn in. Sure, this can shuffle 2 Pieces on field, but he won't be. Since there's better cards to run in his place, the fetch effect to add a Tearalament trap from grave to hand will be needed for when you mill them inevitably with your effects, so that does fix that. Or at least for now, after all, who doesn't want an archetype spell that can outstun traps like Skill Drain, Goes and Match and there can only be one, or Zombie World since it affects your aqua types. Now it's time to screen with Tearalament Screen, which whenever your opponent summons a card while you have a Tearalament or Visas on board, mill 3 cards and weaken all monsters they control. By 500 attack. But the main point here is more mills. More mills means more effects to activate or to fusion summon into even more cards. Like I said earlier, it's our turn, not yours. Finally wrapping up the OCG reveals is Lulukaros, our new fusion boss that needs Chaetrokeros as material. That being the OCG name for Kikolos, to be clear on that one. With some insane effects for such a steep summon requirement, protecting all aqua types from being destroyed by battle, meaning the only way to clear any aqua from field is via effects, which when she leaves due to a card effect she comes back once per turn. This also means clearing the others via effects triggers their grave effects to fusion summon. They all float, and soon will you. And if protection from battle isn't enough, she can negate any card or effect that special summons a monster and destroys that card, but you must send a monster from hand or field after, as per usual. Overall, she's going to be a great addition to the archetype when we get her in the TCG eventually. Hopefully it won't be too far away from now. So I hope you all enjoyed my recap over the coming TCG releases for this archetype, and I'll look forward to future releases. As per usual, like and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. And thanks again to 15.ai for the text-to-speech. As per usual, links to their site is in description.